In a quiet town at his aunt's ranch, Keanu Reeves uncovers a brutal crime. His peaceful arrival turns into a fierce brawl with ruthless criminals. After a bloody brawl, Keanu rescues a young woman linked to a drug cartel. Along his journey, he encounters both loyal allies and traitors hiding their true intentions. A tense chase ensues, where every step could be the last. The heroic mission takes Keanu through forests and abandoned hideouts. The battle goes beyond the physical, touching the dark sides of power and corruption. Keanu engages in intense battles where every second counts. Unexpected twists keep the adrenaline pumping with every passing moment. This is a story of struggle, sacrifice, and hope that never fades. Stay with us if you want to know how the story ends, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Many more exciting stories are ahead. Keanu Reeves had long sought respite from the relentless glare of Hollywood, and this weekend was meant to be his sanctuary, a sojourn into the serene embrace of a quiet town and the rustic comfort of his aunt's sprawling ranch. The ranch, a picturesque haven nestled on the outskirts of a small community, exuded the charm of old country traditions and the promise of a slower pace of life. Rolling fields of golden grass, dotted with clusters of ancient oak trees and wildflowers, stretched out beneath a boundless sky. The early morning light bathed the landscape in soft, amber hues, as dew clung to each blade of grass like a delicate tapestry woven by nature itself. Having arrived in the cool embrace of dawn, Keanu stepped off the dusty pickup truck that had borne him from the city to this pastoral retreat. He carried with him not only the quietude of his own thoughts but also a certain calm resolve born of years spent in the public eye and on the set. There was a measured determination in his stride as he made his way to the weathered wooden porch of the ranch house, a modest, time-worn structure that seemed to hold within its walls the memories of generations past. The air was thick with the scent of hay and the earthy aroma of freshly turned soil, an olfactory reminder that here, time moved to a different rhythm. Inside the house, remnants of family history abounded, sepia photographs of ancestors who once roamed these very lands, heirlooms that whispered of simpler times, and the quiet hum of nostalgia that permeated every corner. Yet for Keanu, the solace of the past was only a backdrop to what he needed most now, a break from the relentless pace of a life defined by relentless scrutiny and high stakes. Today was to be a day of healing, reflection, and perhaps a rekindling of the inner strength that had long lain dormant beneath the layers of cinematic myth and media spectacle. After a brief, silent breakfast accompanied by the rustic clatter of chipped porcelain and the murmur of the wind outside, Keanu felt an irresistible pull towards the natural world that surrounded the ranch. With the morning still young, he sought the exhilaration of a horseback ride, a chance to merge with the land, to feel the steady rhythm of nature beneath him. He approached one of the ranch's sturdy horses, a deep brown steed with kind, patient eyes that reflected an unspoken understanding of the freedom and solace that awaited beyond the familiar confines of the ranch. Without hesitation, he saddled the animal and set off along a meandering path that wended its way through a dense forest on the edge of the property. The forest was an uncharted realm of verdant mystery, a mosaic of sun-dappled clearings, murmuring brooks, and ancient trees whose gnarled branches reached out like the hands of forgotten gods. As the horse trotted along the rugged trail, Keanu allowed his thoughts to wander, meditating on the contrasts between the frenetic energy of his former life and the quiet power of the natural world. The rhythmic clatter of hooves on the dirt path, the rustling of leaves overhead, and the distant call of birds created an immersive symphony that seemed to purge the remnants of urban clamor from his mind. For a long while, the ride was a silent communion with nature. The lush undergrowth and the whisper of wind through the treetops evoked memories of simpler times, a reminder of a life before the glare of cameras and the weight of expectation. The tranquility was almost complete until a disturbance in the distance pulled his attention away from the meditative cadence of his ride. Emerging from the tapestry of green came an unsettling sight, a clearing where the harmonious song of nature was being marred by an act of violence and cruelty. In the clearing, a cluster of 5 rough figures had assembled in a manner that defied the idyllic calm of the surrounding forest. These were not the gentle wanderers of the wild, but hardened bandits whose presence immediately disrupted the sanctity of the place. Their crude forms were stark against the natural beauty of the landscape, and their actions spoke of a darkness that seemed to have no place in such a pure setting. In the center of their disturbing tableau, a young woman was tied to a solitary tree. Her delicate frame, the very picture of vulnerability and despair, was marred by the brutality of her captors. The bandits, their faces twisted with malice and cruelty, were engaged in an act of wanton violence, subjecting her to an abuse that was as merciless as it was senseless. Keanu's heart, which had been steady and reflective mere moments before, now pounded with a surge of righteous indignation. The natural tranquility of the forest clashed violently with the jarring brutality unfolding before him. Every instinct honed by years of training and a lifetime of resilience whispered that something needed to be done. The very fabric of his soul, tempered by his experiences both on and off the screen, could not stand idle in the face of such injustice. In that moment, the quiet heroism that had always lurked beneath the veneer of celebrity was ignited into a blaze of determination. With a swift, measured dismount from his horse, Keanu advanced toward the unfolding scene. His mind, though now alert to the impending conflict, remained unnervingly calm, a testament to the discipline forged through years of preparing for roles that demanded both physical and mental fortitude. Each step was deliberate, each breath measured, as he navigated through the underbrush towards the clearing where cruelty and chaos had taken hold. His approach was unannounced yet purposeful, an embodiment of the resolve to confront injustice regardless of the cost. As he drew nearer, the details of the confrontation became all too clear. The bandits, emboldened by their own cruelty, had not yet noticed the quiet determination that now advanced upon them. The young woman's eyes, wide with terror yet shining with a spark of defiance, conveyed a silent plea for rescue. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of the clash between two irreconcilable forces, the brutality of lawlessness and the unwavering spirit of those who stand against it. In that tense moment, the rustic tranquility of the ranch and its natural surroundings served as both witness and contrast to the violence being perpetrated. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting elongated shadows that merged with the darkness of the bandits' actions, creating an eerie interplay of light and dark, a visual metaphor for the battle between good and evil that was about to unfold. The serene soundscape of the forest was now punctuated by the low murmur of the wind and the distant rustle of leaves, as if nature itself was summoning the courage to stand in solidarity with the wronged. Keanu's presence was not yet known to the malefactors. The determination in his eyes, the measured calm of his posture, and the latent power of his every movement were all harbingers of the conflict to come. Though the situation was volatile and teetering on the edge of chaos, he maintained an unyielding sense of composure. His steps, though silent on the soft forest floor, resonated with the weight of someone who had encountered danger before and emerged triumphant, an embodiment of a hero forged not merely in the glitter of cinematic mythology, but in the crucible of real-life trials. As he neared the clearing, the interplay of emotions and instincts, compassion for the suffering, indignation at the injustice, and the unspoken vow to protect the innocent, merged into a single, unstoppable force. The peaceful morning, which had begun as an idyllic retreat from the demands of a high-profile life, was now irrevocably transformed into the battleground where courage would confront cruelty. In that suspended moment, Keanu Reeves became more than just an actor returning to his roots, he became a symbol of intervention against the tide of darkness that threatened to engulf the tranquility of a world too often marred by violence. With the forest as his silent witness, the stage was set for a confrontation that would ripple far beyond the boundaries of this quiet haven. The air, once laden with the promise of serenity, now vibrated with the palpable tension of impending conflict. The narrative of the day had taken an unexpected, dramatic turn, a moment where the heroism of a single individual would challenge the cruelty of a band of lawless men. As Keanu prepared to step into the fray, the delicate balance between nature and human savagery hung in the air, fragile and ready to be shattered by the clash of ideals. The tension that had gripped the forest clearing seemed to shatter as Keanu's deliberate steps finally closed the distance between him and the cruel spectacle. His presence, a silent harbinger of retribution, unfurled like a dark shadow over the bandits, who now sensed that the balance of power was swiftly shifting. In that moment, the natural harmony of the woods, disturbed by the violent discord of human savagery, seemed to hold its breath. The rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of the forest combined with the anxious heartbeat of the earth itself, creating a charged atmosphere where every second pulsed with impending change. The bandits, caught in the middle of their heinous act, turned their attention towards the intruder. Their eyes, bloodshot with arrogance and cruelty, flared with surprise and, in some, a flicker of uncertainty. They had not anticipated that someone would dare to intervene in their lawless enterprise, least of all a figure as enigmatic and formidable as Keanu Reeves. The clearing, once marked solely by the anguished cries of a young victim, now became the stage upon which a new drama of retribution and moral reckoning would unfold. Keanu's movements were deliberate and unhurried, a striking contrast to the raw, uncontrolled violence of the bandits. Every muscle in his body was primed with a quiet intensity, a residual echo of the disciplined training that had once prepared him for the most perilous of roles. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, took in every detail of the unfolding scene, the contorted faces of the assailants, the trembling posture of the captive, and the interplay of shadows and light that danced across the forest floor. The resolute calm in his gaze belied the storm that roiled within him, a storm born of years spent navigating both the perils of the cinematic world and the unpredictable hazards of real life. Without a word, Keanu stepped forward, his voice a measured murmur carried away by the whispering wind. The sound was both commanding and compassionate, a call for sanity in a realm that had long surrendered to chaos. His words, though soft in tone, reverberated with the weight of unspoken truths and unyielding resolve. They were not merely commands to cease the violence, but an invocation of a deeper, more timeless principle, that cruelty, when met with unwavering courage, would inevitably yield to the light of justice. In the charged silence that followed, the bandits exchanged wary glances. Their leader, a burly man with a sneer permanently etched on his face, stepped forward, his voice gruff and defiant. He dismissed Keanu's intervention as the antics of a meddlesome stranger, one who had no business interfering in matters that, in his view, were beyond reproach. Yet even as he spoke, his bravado wavered, as though a flicker of doubt had seeped into his hardened exterior. The other men shifted uneasily, their earlier confidence now tainted by the realization that their actions might have stirred something far greater than they could control. As the standoff deepened, Keanu's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in a focused determination that spoke of past hardships and battles fought against overwhelming odds. The forest, witness to countless centuries of both beauty and brutality, seemed to close in around them, lending its ancient gravitas to the moment. It was a living tableau of nature's dual capacity for creation and destruction, a reminder that even in the midst of unfathomable violence, the seeds of redemption and hope could be sown. In a calculated motion, Keanu dismounted with a fluid grace that belied the urgency of the situation. His boots, worn yet resolute, made barely a sound against the soft earth as he moved closer to the agitated group. The young woman, whose eyes had been filled with terror moments before, now regarded him with a glimmer of hope, a silent acknowledgement of the possibility of salvation. The interplay of fear and relief painted her features with a fragile light, a beacon amidst the encroaching darkness. The leader of the bandits, sensing that the tide of power was irrevocably turning, attempted to rally his men with a final, defiant outburst. He spat out threats and promises of retribution, his words laced with the venom of desperation. But Keanu's calm presence, reminiscent of a seasoned warrior who had transcended the roles assigned by fate, rendered such threats hollow. His gaze was unyielding as he surveyed the hostile assembly, the weight of his past, both as an actor and as a man who had learned to confront the darkness within himself, infusing every measured word. It was then that the first spark of kinetic energy ignited. Two of the bandits, emboldened by their sheer numbers and a misplaced sense of invulnerability, lunged forward with reckless abandon. In a display of precision that seemed to blur the lines between cinematic choreography and raw, unbridled survival instinct, Keanu evaded their wild swings. His movements, honed by countless hours of rigorous training and discipline, were a symphony of defensive artistry. With deft parries and swift, calculated counters, he neutralized the immediate threat, each strike a testament to the power of focus over fury. The forest around them bore witness to the clash, the sound of fists meeting flesh mingling with the rustling leaves and the distant cry of a hawk overhead. The initial burst of combat was both swift and brutal. The two attackers, caught off guard by the unexpected prowess of their adversary, faltered under the weight of his precise, almost balletic maneuvers. Their momentum dissipated as Keanu redirected their force against them, each blow delivered with the calculated efficiency of a seasoned fighter. The very air around him seemed to crackle with an intensity born of absolute resolve, a resolve that had seen him through roles of mythic heroes and had now crystallized into a tangible, unyielding presence. Amid the flurry of combat, Keanu's focus remained unswervingly fixed on a singular purpose, the safety of the young woman bound to the tree. His mind, ever agile and attuned to the dynamics of the moment, orchestrated each move with a calm precision that belied the chaos of the skirmish. In the midst of the melee, he reached for the concealed Glock nestled within the holster at his hip, a subtle yet decisive reminder that his arsenal extended beyond the artistry of hand-to-hand combat. In one fluid, deliberate motion, he drew the weapon and, with an economy of movement born of necessity and experience, aimed it with unerring accuracy at the third assailant who dared step too close. The staccato report of the firearm shattered the already volatile silence of the clearing. The shot, aimed not to kill but to incapacitate, found its mark in the leg of the third bandit, sending a jolt of pain that disrupted the rhythm of his advance. The impact was immediate and profound, a stark reminder that the line between chaos and order was now firmly drawn in the blood of those who had chosen the path of cruelty. The injured bandit cried out, his expression contorted in a blend of shock and agony, as the searing pain halted his aggressive thrust. In that brief moment of disarray, the remaining assailants faltered. Their earlier confidence now ebbed away in the wake of Keanu's unyielding display of skill and determination. The injured bandit, his leg throbbing with the intensity of the wound, was quickly ushered away by his cohorts, a silent acknowledgment that their strength was waning. In the midst of their retreat, the bandits exchanged bitter words and threats, their voices heavy with the realization that they had underestimated an adversary far beyond their comprehension. Their departure was marked by an ominous promise, a forewarning that the consequences of their actions would reverberate far beyond this isolated encounter. With the immediate threat subdued, Keanu moved swiftly to the young woman. His hands, steady and gentle despite the lingering adrenaline of combat, began the careful process of untying the coarse ropes that had bound her to the tree. Each knot was loosened with a patience that spoke of a man who understood the fragility of trust and the weight of responsibility. The girl's eyes, now reflecting a mixture of relief and lingering fear, met his with a silent gratitude that needed no words. Her slender frame, marred by the ordeal yet still resilient, seemed to radiate an inner light, a beacon of hope in a landscape darkened by cruelty. Once freed, she remained still for a few moments, as if processing the surreal transition from despair to tentative hope. The clearing, still echoing with the remnants of violence, became a quiet witness to this fragile moment of redemption. Keanu, ever the embodiment of calm resolve, assessed the situation with a measured gaze. His thoughts, quick and analytical, raced ahead to the ramifications of what had just transpired. The assailants had retreated, but their ominous words lingered in the air like a sinister promise. They had warned him that he had no idea whom he had crossed, a statement that resonated with a chilling certainty in the depths of his mind. It soon became clear that this was no isolated act of brutality, but a carefully orchestrated ambush that carried the weight of a larger, more insidious conflict. The young woman, her trembling hands still free from the constraints of her bindings, revealed in a trembling voice fragments of a deeper tale. Though her words were soft and tentative, they painted a picture of a life torn apart by forces far beyond the petty cruelties of a small band of outlaws. She disclosed that she was the daughter of the head of a powerful narcotics cartel, a man whose reputation was built on a foundation of ruthless ambition and unfathomable violence. Her escape from that life had been a desperate bid for freedom, a chance to forge a new identity away from the suffocating grip of her father's legacy. Yet, in the cruel twist of fate, she had become a pawn in a sinister game of retribution, targeted by rival cartel members determined to exact revenge and instill terror in their enemies' ranks. The gravity of her revelation added layers of complexity to an already volatile situation. Keanu's mind, ever analytical, began piecing together the broader implications of the encounter. The violence he had just witnessed was no random act of malice, it was a calculated maneuver in a shadow war fought by criminal empires whose reach extended into every corner of society. The bandits, mere foot soldiers in this clandestine battle, were now scattered and retreating, but the underlying threat was far from extinguished. The rival cartel's machinations had ensnared the young woman, and by extension, anyone who dared to interfere with their brutal operations. In the silence that followed the initial clash, the forest itself seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging the delicate balance between destruction and redemption. Keanu, with the resolute calm of one who had seen the darkest depths of human depravity, resolved to stand by the side of this young woman. The path ahead was fraught with peril, a journey that would pit them against not only the remnants of the marauding bandits but also the insidious forces of cartel warfare, where every shadow might conceal a new threat and every whisper could portend a deeper betrayal. With measured deliberation, Keanu helped the girl to her feet. Their eyes met in a silent pact, a mutual understanding that their fates were now intertwined. The quiet resolve that had propelled him from the ranch to this clearing now found renewed purpose in the promise of protecting her. The morning light, once gentle and unassuming, began to cast sharper, more determined rays through the trees, as if heralding the beginning of a new chapter defined not by violence alone but by the courage to confront it head-on. As they prepared to leave the clearing behind, the forest's quiet majesty seemed to cloak them in an aura of clandestine purpose. Each step away from the site of cruelty was a step toward an uncertain future, yet every stride carried the weight of a burgeoning determination to reclaim the sanctity of life. Keanu's mind churned with strategies and contingencies, plans to evade the inevitable pursuit of cartel enforcers, schemes to navigate a labyrinth of treacherous alliances, and a steadfast promise to guide the girl to safety, no matter the cost. Their journey took them along hidden trails and winding paths that twisted through groves of ancient pines and dense underbrush. The landscape, both rugged and beautiful, served as both refuge and reminder of the delicate interplay between nature's splendor and the scars inflicted by human malice. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, became a subtle counterpoint to the distant, ominous threat that loomed ever closer, a threat that was as relentless as the passage of time itself. The forest air, heavy with the scent of pine and earth, carried with it the murmurs of unseen life. Shadows danced in the periphery of vision, and the filtered sunlight created patterns on the ground that seemed to hint at hidden messages. In these fleeting moments, the young woman, still reeling from her recent ordeal, began to speak in hushed tones about her past. Her narrative unfolded like a tapestry of sorrow and resilience, a chronicle of a life marked by luxury and terror in equal measure. The daughter of a feared cartel king, she had long yearned for an escape from the suffocating grip of familial destiny. Her words, though laced with pain, resonated with the quiet strength of someone who had endured unimaginable loss and hardship. As they trekked deeper into the wilderness, the duo encountered signs that the bandits, and by extension, the cartel enforcers, were not far behind. The sudden appearance of unfamiliar tire tracks and the distant rumble of vehicles hinted at a coordinated pursuit, a reminder that their temporary reprieve in the sanctuary of nature might be short-lived. Keanu's instincts, honed by years of navigating perilous situations on and off the screen, urged him to quicken his pace. With every measured step, he silently reassured the young woman that their escape was not merely a flight from danger but a deliberate march toward reclaiming control over their own destinies. The landscape gradually transformed as they neared a series of rocky outcrops that overlooked a winding river, a watercourse that meandered through the valley like a lifeline of hope. The river, its surface glistening under the afternoon sun, beckoned as a natural route toward a safer haven. Its banks, lined with smooth stones and clusters of reeds, promised not only a physical barrier against pursuers but also a symbolic cleansing of the blood and sorrow that had marred the earlier hours of the day. In this transitional moment, the echoes of their recent conflict still reverberated in the silence. The memories of harsh blows, the sharp report of a firearm, and the anguished cries of the oppressed mingled with the natural symphony of flowing water and rustling leaves. Every detail of the journey was etched into the fabric of the day, a day that had begun with the promise of solitude on a distant ranch and had spiraled into a battle for redemption against forces of unimaginable brutality. The journey along the riverbank was fraught with its own challenges. The terrain was uneven, and the sound of rushing water often masked the subtle cues of danger lurking in the shadows. Yet Keanu's focus remained unbroken. With each step, he remained ever vigilant, aware that the enemy's reach extended far beyond the immediate threat of the bandits. The rival cartel's tendrils of influence could strike unexpectedly, and the omnipresent possibility of betrayal lurked in every rustle of the wind and every distant shout in the valley. As the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, casting long, golden shadows over the rugged landscape, the pair reached a secluded bend in the river. Here, nature offered a momentary haven, a small, overgrown campsite that seemed abandoned yet inviting. It was a place where the chaos of the day could be momentarily set aside, a sanctuary where they could regroup and plan the next phase of their escape. Keanu, his mind still abuzz with the immediacy of recent events, guided the young woman to a sheltered nook beneath a cluster of cedar trees. The ground was soft with pine needles, and the gentle murmur of the river provided a soothing counterpoint to the tension that clung to their every thought. In the cool twilight, as the forest began to settle into a quiet lull, the young woman recounted more details of her troubled past. Her voice, soft and tremulous at first, gradually gained strength as she disclosed the inner workings of the cartel that had once bound her. The narrative painted a grim portrait of a world where loyalty was bought and sold, where fear was wielded like a weapon, and where the line between friend and foe was as murky as the depths of a forgotten well. Each word was a revelation, a glimpse into the depths of corruption and despair that had driven her to seek refuge in the unlikeliest of places. Keanu listened intently, his expression a mask of empathy and resolve. In that moment, the young woman was not merely a victim of random violence, she was a key to unraveling a far more intricate web of criminal machinations. The stakes, it became increasingly apparent, were far higher than a single act of cruelty in a secluded forest clearing. The betrayal and violence that had defined her past now served as a catalyst for a greater confrontation, a reckoning that would force those responsible for her torment to face the consequences of their actions. The night deepened, and with it came a sense of both trepidation and determination. The duo knew that the road ahead would be perilous, fraught with unexpected ambushes, shifting allegiances, and the constant threat of discovery by forces determined to see them silenced. Yet, as the stars emerged in the vast expanse of the night sky, their light offered a silent promise, a beacon of hope that even in the darkest hours, courage and conviction could illuminate a path toward redemption. In the quiet intimacy of that makeshift refuge, Keanu's mind raced with strategies and contingencies. He contemplated the possibility of utilizing the natural terrain to their advantage, of finding hidden trails and safe houses that might offer temporary respite. His thoughts turned to the network of allies he had cultivated over the years, old friends and trusted confidants who, despite the distance from his celebrity life, remained committed to the pursuit of justice and the protection of the innocent. Every plan, every whispered hope, coalesced into a singular determination, to escort the young woman safely out of this treacherous labyrinth, no matter the cost. As the night waned and the first hints of dawn began to illuminate the horizon, the resolve that had carried them through the darkest moments of the day solidified into a quiet, unyielding purpose. The journey ahead promised not only the danger of physical pursuit but also the intricate challenges of dismantling a criminal empire built on fear and betrayal. Yet, for Keanu and his newfound charge, every step was imbued with the promise of a future free from the chains of violence, a future where the scars of the past could, at last, begin to heal. In the soft glow of early morning, as the forest slowly awakened to a new day, the pair gathered their few belongings and prepared to set forth once more. Their path would soon lead them to crossroads of destiny and confrontation with the remnants of a cartel's pervasive influence. The quiet determination that had been forged in the crucible of violence was now tempered by a newfound sense of purpose, a purpose that transcended the boundaries of fear and retribution. With every step taken along the rugged trail that wound alongside the river, they moved closer to a destiny that, while fraught with uncertainty, shimmered with the promise of redemption and renewal. Thus, under the nascent light of dawn and amidst the quiet murmur of the awakening forest, the journey continued. Keanu Reeves and the young woman, bound by a shared resolve to escape the clutches of a brutal past and the looming threat of an unforgiving cartel, ventured forth into the unknown. Their silhouettes, etched against the soft hues of a new day, carried the silent vow of resistance, a vow that in the face of overwhelming darkness, the light of courage would never be extinguished. As dawn fully broke, the soft light filtering through the canopy of towering pines revealed a landscape both breathtaking and fraught with hidden menace. Keanu Reeves and the young woman, whose name, though unspoken in this chapter of their perilous journey, resonated with the fragile hope of a new beginning, pressed on along a narrow, winding trail. The remnants of the previous night's confrontation still lingered like shadows in their minds, and every rustle in the undergrowth, every distant snap of a twig, seemed to portend the return of danger. Their pace was measured but urgent, for the threat of the cartel's enforcers hung over them like a specter. The forest, with its ancient wisdom and untamed beauty, offered both solace and treachery. As the pair moved deeper into the wilderness, the path became less defined, a labyrinth of winding trails, hidden clearings, and unexpected clearings that appeared as if conjured by the will of the land itself. Keanu's steady eyes scanned the surroundings, ever alert for signs of pursuit. The soft murmur of a brook, the gentle chorus of morning birds, and the whisper of the wind through the trees provided a deceptive backdrop of tranquility, masking the imminent perils that lay in wait. The young woman walked close beside Keanu, her steps hesitant yet determined. Every now and then, she would glance behind her as if expecting the long shadows of their pursuers to emerge from the forest's depths. Her recent ordeal had etched lines of both fear and resilience into her delicate features, and her quiet determination was a beacon of strength that complemented Keanu's stoic resolve. Together, they navigated the underbrush, their every move a silent dance of survival and cautious hope. A short distance ahead, the trail led them to a narrow ravine where the sound of flowing water grew louder. The river, still a sparkling ribbon in the early light, carved its way through the rugged terrain. Its banks were lined with moss-covered rocks and clusters of ferns, and the gentle current lent a temporary reprieve from the tension that had become their constant companion. Keanu paused at the edge of the water, surveying the horizon with a strategist's eye. He sensed that this natural feature could serve as both a refuge and a barrier, a natural moat against the encroaching threat of cartel mercenaries. It was in this moment of relative calm that the first unmistakable sign of danger appeared. From across the riverbank, a series of low, measured thuds echoed against the rocky outcrop. At first, they seemed to be the random sounds of wildlife, but then the rhythmic cadence of footsteps and the distant murmur of hushed voices broke through the serene melody of nature. Keanu's instincts, honed by years of cinematic and real-life confrontation, surged to the forefront. He signaled to the young woman with a slight nod, and they moved stealthily toward the cover of a clump of dense bushes near the water's edge. Hidden by the natural concealment offered by the foliage, they peered cautiously across the river. In the dappled morning light, silhouettes emerged, men in dark, tactical gear moving with deliberate precision along a path that skirted the riverbank. Their mannerisms and the formation in which they advanced spoke of military-like discipline, a clear indication that these were not random wanderers, but cartel enforcers sent to track and intercept them. The men carried sophisticated weaponry and communicated in short, clipped phrases that reverberated with the authority of trained operatives. A chill ran down Keanu's spine as he realized the gravity of their situation. These were not the crude, disorganized bandits of the previous encounter, but professional operatives tasked with ensuring that the young woman, and by extension, the secrets of her dangerous lineage, remained under the control of her father's empire. The young woman's eyes widened, and she gripped Keanu's arm in silent alarm. He offered her a reassuring squeeze, a gesture that spoke of unwavering resolve even as his mind raced through the possibilities of escape and confrontation. For several tense minutes, the duo remained hidden, the soft babble of the river the only sound punctuating the stifling silence. Keanu's gaze flicked from the approaching figures to the surrounding terrain, mentally mapping escape routes and potential ambush points. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the ancient trees standing sentinel as if to remind them that nature, in its timeless wisdom, could be both merciful and unforgiving. Every detail, the slight glint of sunlight on a dewdrop, the whisper of a breeze carrying the scent of pine, merged into a heightened awareness that allowed Keanu to assess the situation with cold precision. After what felt like an eternity in that suspended moment, the enforcers split into two groups. One group continued along the riverbank in pursuit of any sign of movement, while the other veered off toward a cluster of rocky outcrops where natural cover abounded. Keanu weighed his options swiftly. Engaging the enforcers head-on would be a dangerous gamble. Instead, his experience had taught him that evasion combined with strategic delay might afford them the time necessary to reach safer ground. The rugged terrain provided many opportunities for concealment and diversion, and he resolved to exploit every one of them. With silent urgency, Keanu motioned for the young woman to follow him as he led her off the beaten path. They slipped into a narrow trail that wound through a dense copse of cedar and fir trees, leaving behind the river's open banks. The forest floor was a mosaic of fallen leaves, twisted roots, and patches of soft moss, each step taken with the care of someone who understood that the wrong move could spell disaster. The sound of distant footsteps, muffled by the thick undergrowth, reminded them that the enforcers were still in pursuit, their disciplined movements echoing faintly like a drumbeat of impending conflict. As they traversed the forest, the terrain began to change subtly. The trees grew taller and more ancient, their trunks gnarled by time, and the canopy overhead thickened to block out the harsh light of the sun, casting the forest into an almost surreal twilight. Here, in the realm of nature's quiet majesty, Keanu's mind turned to reflection even amidst the chaos. He thought of the countless roles he had played on screen, a hero, a warrior, a man of few words, and how those experiences had prepared him, in unexpected ways, for the challenges of real life. But this was not a rehearsal, and every decision he made carried with it the weight of life and death. The path led them to a natural clearing surrounded by dense thickets and marked by an enormous, ancient oak that stood like a sentinel at its center. It was here that Keanu decided to pause for a moment. The clearing, bathed in the soft light of the filtered morning sun, offered a temporary sanctuary where they could catch their breath and reassess their situation. The young woman sank onto a fallen log, her eyes still reflecting the turmoil of recent events. Keanu knelt beside her, his gaze gentle yet filled with a steely determination. In the quiet that enveloped the clearing, the pair shared a brief moment of silent communication, a vow that no matter how formidable the enemy or how treacherous the path, they would face the coming storm together. Unbeknownst to them, however, the forest was not entirely silent. In the shadows beyond the clearing, a solitary figure observed their movements with calculating eyes. This new presence, cloaked in the ambiguity of the forest's dim recesses, was not part of the cartel's organized force but seemed to be a lone operative with his own agenda. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, followed every nuance of Keanu's movements. For a long moment, he remained hidden, as if weighing the potential benefits of intervening, or perhaps exploiting, the vulnerable situation. The silence of the forest seemed to stretch indefinitely before he finally melted back into the undergrowth, leaving behind only the memory of his presence and the faint rustle of leaves as he disappeared from view. The discovery of this unknown observer added another layer of complexity to the unfolding drama. Keanu's mind, always alert to the possibility of unforeseen adversaries, now considered that the threat might come from multiple fronts. The lone operative could be an ally, a foe, or a wild card with motives as murky as the depths of the criminal underworld they were fleeing. With little time to ponder, Keanu resolved that his primary focus must remain on evasion and protection. He carefully hoisted the young woman to her feet, guiding her with a quiet urgency that belied the inner turmoil of a man accustomed to chaos but unaccustomed to the moral weight of true danger. Their journey resumed with renewed caution. The dense forest provided ample cover, but it also concealed hidden pitfalls, natural obstacles that could hinder their progress and betray their position. Keanu led them along a narrow ridge that skirted the edge of a steep drop, the ground beneath their feet uneven and treacherous. Every step was calculated, every breath a silent prayer for safe passage. The echoes of distant pursuit grew fainter, but the oppressive tension of being hunted never fully dissipated. As midday approached, the forest began to lighten, and the sounds of nature took on a different cadence. The chirping of birds gave way to the occasional rustle of small animals, and the previously foreboding underbrush now revealed a tapestry of vibrant greens and sunlit clearings. Yet, even as the forest transformed into a realm of unexpected beauty, the memory of the earlier violence remained etched in every tree and every shadow. The juxtaposition of nature's serene beauty with the harsh reality of human cruelty was a reminder that the world was capable of both wonder and devastation, a duality that Keanu had come to understand all too well. In a rare moment of vulnerability, the young woman allowed herself a fleeting smile as they passed a sun-dappled glen, its wildflowers nodding gently in the breeze. This ephemeral expression of hope, however, was quickly tempered by the practical knowledge that the cartel's reach was long and their resolve unyielding. Keanu's mind churned with plans and contingencies, every detail of the terrain now catalogued as potential refuge or hazard. His thoughts turned to the possibility of reaching a hidden safe house, an old, abandoned cabin rumored to lie deep within these woods, a relic of a bygone era that had once served as a retreat for those seeking to escape the clutches of modern civilization. Such a place, if it existed, could offer them the respite they so desperately needed before the inevitable confrontation with the forces that pursued them. The hours slipped by with the measured cadence of survival, and as twilight approached once more, the forest began to don a cloak of deep indigo and violet. Shadows lengthened, and the interplay of fading light and emerging darkness imbued the landscape with an otherworldly quality. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of the wind, assumed a heightened significance as if the forest itself were alive and conspiring in their fate. Keanu led the way with unwavering determination, his senses sharpened by the knowledge that nightfall would bring its own set of challenges, a cloak of darkness that could either serve as a shield or a trap. With each careful step, the weight of their journey pressed upon them, the burden of escaping a relentless enemy, the responsibility of safeguarding a life caught in the crossfire of criminal ambition, and the ever-present reminder that the line between heroism and despair was as thin as a thread spun in the twilight. The forest, ancient and inscrutable, bore witness to their silent struggle, its timeless presence a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, hope could endure. And so, as the first stars began to pierce the darkening sky, Keanu Reeves and the young woman pressed onward, their path illuminated by the faint, persistent glow of determination and the unspoken promise that, come what may, they would continue to fight for the fragile light of redemption. The forest deepened as twilight yielded fully to the night, and the path that Keanu Reeves and his young companion trod became increasingly obscure under the thickening canopy of ancient trees. The air was heavy with dew and the scent of pine, and every step taken along the uneven trail seemed to echo with the whispers of a past long buried in the earth. In that somber darkness, the duo moved with silent determination, a quiet defiance against the looming threat that pursued them even as the night provided its own cloak of ambiguity. Their journey was now as much an internal voyage as it was an escape from the relentless clutches of a criminal empire. Keanu led the way with a caution that bordered on ritualistic, each step was deliberate, every pause measured to absorb the nocturnal symphony of the forest. The soft rustling of leaves, the distant cry of nocturnal creatures, and the low hum of the wind through the branches melded into an orchestral backdrop against which the pair advanced. Their destination was the rumored safe house, a dilapidated cabin hidden deep within the wilderness, once a refuge for those fleeing the oppressive grasp of modernity and now a potential haven from the marauding forces of the cartel. The very idea of this sanctuary had become a beacon in their troubled minds, a tangible promise of respite amid the chaos. As they pressed deeper into the labyrinthine woods, the terrain began to change subtly. The ground underfoot grew rockier, interspersed with thick patches of tangled brush and sporadic clearings that revealed the unyielding sky above. In these brief moments of exposure, the cold light of distant stars flickered through gaps in the canopy, offering transient glimpses of the endless heavens. This interplay of shadow and light evoked a sense of timelessness, a reminder that the natural world had endured countless cycles of violence and renewal, indifferent to the transient struggles of human conflict. In one particularly vast clearing, the forest opened into a natural amphitheater of earth and sky. Here, the sounds of their cautious passage were momentarily drowned out by the rustling of the wind and the soft murmur of a hidden stream. Keanu paused, his eyes scanning the horizon with an intensity that spoke of memories both personal and professional, a lifetime spent embodying characters who fought for redemption, justice, and truth. The weight of his experiences, from the roles that had defined him on the silver screen to the quiet moments of introspection in the solitude of nature, converged in that silent instant. It was as if the very land was offering him a moment of respite, a chance to catch his breath before the next inevitable confrontation. Yet, even in this temporary lull, the threat of pursuit was never far from his mind. The dark tendrils of the cartel's reach extended even into the remote wilderness, their presence marked by the distant, almost imperceptible sound of tires crunching over gravel or the faint echoes of voices that seemed to meld with the night air. Each sound was a potential harbinger of danger, a reminder that the safe house they sought might not remain undisturbed for long. Still, in that brief interlude of natural stillness, Keanu's resolve only strengthened, steeling his will to protect the young woman whose fate had now become inseparably entwined with his own. The young woman, whose eyes still shimmered with the residual terror of the day's earlier violence, regarded the unfolding darkness with a mixture of apprehension and cautious hope. Her journey, from the brutal encounter in the clearing to this moment of tentative sanctuary, had transformed her in subtle yet profound ways. Though her voice had remained unspoken in this chapter of their struggle, her presence radiated a quiet fortitude that belied the tumultuous path she had trodden. In the dim light, the lines of sorrow and resolve on her face formed an intricate tapestry of loss, resilience, and an emerging determination to claim a future of her own making. After a time that stretched uncomfortably between the measured beats of their footsteps, Keanu signaled a change in direction. The path wound uphill, a narrow trail flanked by dense thickets and intermittent clearings that provided scant relief from the oppressive darkness. Every step upward was a battle against exhaustion, both physical and mental, yet the promise of a vantage point spurred them onward. The higher ground was expected to offer not only a clearer view of the surrounding territory but also a strategic location from which to gauge the proximity of their pursuers. In the silence of the ascent, the only sounds were the crunch of gravel underfoot and the soft murmur of the wind, a delicate counterpoint to the thunder of their racing hearts. Reaching the summit of a modest rise, the pair paused to survey the expanse below. The night had deepened to a velvet black punctuated by the silver shimmer of stars, and the forest spread out in undulating waves of shadow and light. In that elevated position, Keanu's eyes, trained by years of on-set discipline and life's harsher realities, detected subtle signs of disturbance, faint trails that betrayed the passage of others, the distant glow of headlights that might herald a search party, and the unnatural stillness in certain patches of the woods. The natural landscape, though majestic, had become a silent battleground where every rustle and every shift of the wind might presage either salvation or renewed danger. There was no time for extended contemplation. The chill in the night air, the heightened awareness of every sound, and the palpable tension in the atmosphere compelled Keanu to move with purpose. The next leg of their journey would take them to the forgotten cabin, a structure rumored to be as old as the forest itself, built by hands long gone and reclaimed by nature's relentless march. As they descended the ridge, the trail narrowed to a rough, almost imperceptible path that wound between towering firs and ancient cedars. The descent was treacherous, the ground slick with dew and leaves, demanding a steady focus that left little room for distraction. The forest canopy above, now a dense quilt of interlocking branches and leaves, muffled the outside world and enveloped them in a cocoon of muted sounds. It was in this seclusion that memories of past encounters, both real and cinematic, flickered in Keanu's mind like echoes of a distant film reel. The roles he had embodied, the battles he had fought on screen, and the whispered legends of heroes who had once traversed similar paths all merged into a single, unyielding conviction, that no force, however dark or determined, could extinguish the spark of human courage. This inner flame, nurtured by both personal conviction and the collective memory of those who had dared to challenge tyranny, now guided his every step. After what felt like hours traversing a landscape that was both forbidding and strangely beautiful, the forest began to yield signs of human habitation. A narrow, overgrown trail gave way to the remnants of a long-forgotten road, its edges softened by the relentless encroachment of nature. Faint traces of man-made structures, weathered wooden posts, a rusted sign, and the distant silhouette of what might once have been a barn, hinted at the possibility that the safe house was not merely a legend, but a tangible refuge waiting to be rediscovered. The prospect of reaching this haven filled Keanu with a cautious optimism, even as he remained ever vigilant for the slightest indication that their location might have been compromised. The journey took on a more purposeful pace as they neared the coordinates that had been passed down through whispered legends among those who sought to escape the inhumane grip of organized crime. The cabin, if it indeed still stood, would be a relic of a bygone era, a testament to a time when sanctuary could be found in the quiet solitude of the wilderness, far removed from the pervasive influence of modern vice. With each deliberate step, Keanu's mind catalogued the intricate details of the terrain, the way the moonlight played upon the dew-laden leaves, the subtle shifts in the forest's density, and the recurring scent of damp earth that marked the passage of time in this untamed landscape. At last, the pair arrived at a small clearing dominated by a weathered structure that seemed to emerge organically from the forest floor. The cabin, built of rough-hewn timber and crowned with a sagging roof that had seen countless seasons come and go, exuded a quiet dignity despite its evident wear. Ivy and moss clung to its walls as if nature itself sought to reclaim the memory of the building, and the windows, though shattered in places, reflected the faint glow of the moon like watchful eyes. In this moment, the cabin represented more than mere shelter, it was a symbol of resilience, a bulwark against the relentless tide of corruption and cruelty that had driven them into the wilderness. Keanu approached the cabin with the measured caution of a man who knew that even sanctuaries could harbor hidden dangers. The door, swollen by years of exposure to the elements, creaked ominously as he pushed it open, revealing a dim interior shrouded in shadows and dust. Inside, remnants of a long-abandoned life lay scattered, an old wooden table marred by the scars of time, a faded quilt draped over a rickety chair, and the lingering scent of wood smoke and forgotten memories. Despite the evident decay, the cabin possessed an aura of quiet safety, a temporary refuge from the chaos of the world outside. The space was large enough to provide cover and concealment, with a central room that offered multiple exits and nooks where one could hide or regroup. Keanu quickly assessed the surroundings, mentally noting the positions of broken beams, the sturdiness of the remaining walls, and the potential vantage points that could be utilized in the event of an intrusion. His seasoned mind, attuned to the smallest details through years of both scripted combat and unplanned survival, catalogued each element as a tool in the unfolding battle between those who sought to impose fear and those determined to reclaim freedom. With the young woman by his side, Keanu set about securing the cabin as best as the dilapidated structure would allow. They moved silently through the dim corridors, closing creaking doors behind them and arranging the sparse furniture to block potential entry points. In the quiet aftermath of their arrival, the oppressive tension of the past hours was momentarily replaced by a fragile sense of security, a pause in the storm that allowed them to catch their breath and gather their strength. Inside this haven, time seemed to take on a different quality. The night stretched long and introspective, filled with the gentle patter of rain that began to fall in soft, rhythmic intervals upon the roof. Each droplet was a small percussion in the symphony of survival, a reminder that even in isolation, the natural world continued its eternal dance. In that steady cadence of rain and silence, Keanu's thoughts turned inward. He reflected upon the gravity of the situation, the inescapable reality that the forces they had evaded in the forest were not likely to relent. Yet, in the quiet isolation of the cabin, there was also an opportunity, a moment to plan, to strategize, and to forge a path forward in a world that had been irrevocably altered by violence and betrayal. The young woman, still reeling from the terror of recent events, found a measure of solace in the unexpected refuge. Her eyes, which had borne the weight of sorrow and fear, now took on a glimmer of cautious hope as she observed Keanu's methodical preparations. The unspoken understanding between them was palpable, a mutual recognition that while the road ahead would be fraught with peril, the cabin was now a sanctuary where they could regroup and reclaim their resolve. Throughout the long, introspective hours of the night, the cabin served as both a shelter and a crucible. It was a place where plans were forged in whispered conversation and where the silent determination of two unlikely allies was tempered by the reality of their shared plight. Outside, the forest continued its nocturnal vigil, a living testament to the cyclical nature of life and the persistence of hope even in the darkest of hours. As the first pale hints of dawn began to seep through the fractured windows, the fragile stillness of the cabin was punctured by the sound of distant footsteps and muffled voices, a stark reminder that their temporary sanctuary might soon be compromised. Keanu's eyes flickered open as he sensed the stirring of danger beyond the walls they had so painstakingly secured. The night's brief respite was drawing to a close, and the relentless march of their pursuers was an ever-present specter on the horizon. In those final moments before the new day fully emerged, the weight of what lay ahead pressed upon them with an almost tangible force. The safe house, though a welcome reprieve, was only a brief stop in a journey that promised more hardship, more confrontation, and more tests of the human spirit. Yet, in that fragile twilight between night and day, as the cabin bore silent witness to their shared determination, Keanu Reeves and the young woman steeled themselves for the challenges to come. The interplay of vulnerability and resolve, fear and hope, had brought them together in a fragile alliance, a bond forged in the crucible of adversity and destined to be tested as the forces of darkness advanced. Thus, as the new day dawned with its uncertain light and the promise of further trials, the cabin remained their temporary bastion. In the quiet moments of preparation that followed, the resolve that had carried them through the perils of the forest was rekindled. The storm of conflict had not yet abated, but within the time-worn walls of that hidden refuge, a spark of hope endured, a spark that, against all odds, would continue to burn even as the night gave way to the harsh realities of the day. As the first tendrils of dawn filtered through the fractured windows of the dilapidated safe house, a tense stillness settled over the interior, a silence laden with foreboding, as if the very walls were aware of the approaching storm. Keanu Reeves, still alert from the long night, rose with measured determination. The soft, rhythmic patter of rain on the corrugated roof had subsided into a distant murmur, leaving behind an eerie quiet that belied the urgency of the threat looming just beyond the fragile sanctuary. Outside, the forest whispered secrets in the pre-dawn light, its ancient boughs and tangled undergrowth hiding the unseen forces that sought to reclaim their prey. In the dim glow of early morning, Keanu moved methodically through the narrow corridors of the cabin, his footsteps as silent as the breath of the wind. Every creak of the old wooden floor, every sigh of the weathered beams, resonated like an omen of the inevitable confrontation. The young woman, still recovering from the traumatic events of the previous hours, sat on a time-worn bench near a cracked window. Her eyes, though shadowed with lingering terror, shone with an inner light that spoke of resilience born of hardship. In that quiet moment, the gravity of their situation pressed upon them both. Their temporary refuge was a mere pause in the relentless pursuit of those who would see them silenced. Keanu's mind, a fusion of cinematic training and lived experience, raced through contingencies. He recalled the whispered warnings of distant footsteps and muffled voices from the previous night, sounds that had hinted at the impending arrival of cartel enforcers. Now, as the pale light of dawn grew stronger, those ominous cues were unmistakable. The soft, deliberate thuds on the wooden platform outside, the gentle scrape of tires against a hidden track in the underbrush, all converged into a dissonant symphony of impending conflict. With the precision of a seasoned warrior, Keanu moved to secure every exit in the cabin, reinforcing doors and windows with makeshift barricades fashioned from heavy, splintered furniture. His movements were deliberate and economical, each action informed by a deep understanding that survival depended on every detail. In the midst of this frenetic preparation, the young woman remained an emblem of quiet defiance. Although her past had been marked by the cruelty of a world dominated by violence and treachery, her spirit had not been wholly extinguished. There was a resolute determination in the set of her shoulders, a silent vow that she would not allow the legacy of her father's empire, or the cruelty of those who sought to manipulate her fate, to define her existence. It was this inner strength that had drawn Keanu to her side, forging an unspoken alliance based on mutual respect and a shared desire for redemption. The minutes ticked by with agonizing slowness, each one steeped in anticipation. As the first rays of sunlight began to cut through the lingering darkness, a sudden, sharp sound shattered the fragile calm. From outside, a heavy knock reverberated against the cabin's weathered door, a measured, insistent pounding that sent a jolt of adrenaline coursing through Keanu's veins. In that instant, the safe house transformed from a quiet haven into a potential battleground. Keanu exchanged a look with the young woman, a wordless communication that acknowledged both the imminent danger and the resolve to face it head-on. Without pausing to deliberate further, Keanu moved swiftly to the door. He pressed an ear against the cold, splintered wood, straining to decipher the nature of the intruder's approach. The knock persisted, punctuated by muffled voices that carried a cadence of authority and menace. These were not the panicked shouts of desperate survivors, they were the controlled, deliberate commands of trained operatives. The realization was as chilling as it was inescapable: the cartel's enforcers had come for them. The pounding continued, steadier now, more insistent, and with it came a subtle, almost imperceptible creak of a door on the other side, as if the intruders were preparing to breach the threshold. Keanu's gaze swept over the interior of the cabin, noting every shadow, every potential vantage point. In the fading moments of quiet before the storm, he gathered his few makeshift weapons, a heavy metal pipe, a length of chain, and the ever-present concealed Glock. Each item, though modest, was a tool forged in the crucible of necessity, a symbol of the resolve that had carried him through countless battles both on screen and in life. He then motioned for the young woman to retreat further into the safer recesses of the cabin, where she could hide behind a collapsed bookshelf and remain out of immediate harm's way. The knock grew louder, reverberating with an intensity that suggested the presence of more than just a single intruder. Keanu took a deep breath, his mind rapidly cycling through possible scenarios. The door, scarred by the passage of time and nature's relentless reclamation, now seemed to vibrate with the energy of impending conflict. In one fluid motion, he positioned himself in front of the entrance, his eyes narrowing as he prepared to confront the oncoming threat. The seconds stretched interminably, and then, as if in a carefully choreographed sequence, the door burst open with a force that sent splinters flying into the cold morning air. In that explosive moment, the first of the enforcers stepped into the cabin, a broad-shouldered figure clad in dark tactical gear, his face obscured by a balaclava that concealed any hint of emotion. His entry was swift and forceful, and as he swept his gaze over the interior, his eyes locked onto Keanu's unwavering stare. The two figures, now separated by mere feet, existed in a charged standoff where every heartbeat seemed to echo with the promise of violence. The enforcer's hand moved instinctively toward the holster at his hip, and for a brief, suspended moment, time itself appeared to slow, each second elongated into a tapestry of tension and uncertainty. Keanu's training and instincts took over. He advanced in measured steps, his body coiled with the promise of swift retaliation. The enforcer, equally prepared for the confrontation, took a defensive stance. Around them, the remnants of the safe house, the creaking beams, the scattered debris, the faint glow of the rising sun, witnessed the silent duel of wills. The heavy silence was broken only by the rhythmic pounding of Keanu's heart and the distant sounds of nature beginning to stir outside. In that charged instant, the gulf between hero and adversary was defined solely by the actions that would follow. Without the benefit of a moment's hesitation, Keanu launched into action. The first blow came not as a reckless attack, but as a carefully calculated maneuver, a precise strike aimed at disarming the intruder and seizing control of the situation. The enforcer reacted with the speed of a man who had been trained for such encounters, his movements fluid and instinctive as he parried the attack. The ensuing clash was a ballet of violence, each movement punctuated by the harsh reality of survival. The metallic clang of the makeshift pipe meeting the enforcer's arm, the sharp exhale of breath as impact resonated through the room, and the staccato rhythm of rapid footsteps, all merged into a scene that was as cinematic as it was brutally real. Beyond the initial skirmish, the cabin became a theater of chaos. Shadows danced along the walls as more figures emerged from the surrounding darkness, their voices a low murmur of commands and threats. Keanu fought with a focused intensity that transcended the limitations of his cinematic persona. Each strike, each calculated dodge, was infused with the raw power of a man who had dedicated his life to protecting those who could not defend themselves. The heavy thud of bodies colliding, the splintering of wood under the force of blows, and the echo of muffled grunts of exertion created a visceral symphony that filled the confined space. The young woman, hidden behind the collapsed bookshelf, watched the unfolding battle with a mixture of horror and awe. Though her heart pounded with fear, she recognized in Keanu a protector, a beacon of resilience amidst the encroaching darkness. In the midst of chaos, moments of silent determination passed between them, a fleeting glance, a nod of mutual understanding, and the unspoken promise that survival, however improbable, was their shared goal. As the struggle reached its fevered pitch, the battle spilled out from the immediate vicinity of the door. The enforcers, now a small cadre determined to overwhelm their adversary, pressed in from multiple angles. Keanu, his body a testament to years of discipline and combat training, navigated the confined space with a precision that belied the overwhelming odds. Every movement was a careful balance between offense and defense, his eyes darting to intercept an incoming attack, his body twisting gracefully to evade the lethal arcs of weaponry. The sound of the Glock, a sharp, resonant report, cut through the cacophony, a reminder that in the world of survival, even the smallest gesture could turn the tide of battle. One of the enforcers, having dared to close in too quickly, staggered back as a searing shot struck his leg, sending him crashing against the splintered wall. Outside, the rising sun illuminated the forest in a pale, ethereal glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch in silent witness to the conflict unfolding within the cabin. In that interplay of light and darkness, the safe house transformed from a quiet refuge into a crucible where the fate of two lives hung in a delicate balance. Keanu's movements, though fueled by the raw urgency of combat, were never without purpose. Each calculated blow, each decisive maneuver, was a reaffirmation of his resolve to protect the young woman and dismantle the forces of cruelty that had invaded their sanctuary. As the battle raged on, it became increasingly clear that the enforcers were not merely agents of chaos, but operatives from a vast, insidious network. Their disciplined coordination, their relentless advance, it was as though they were an extension of the cartel's unyielding will. Yet, even as the tide of violence surged, Keanu's determination did not waver. With every adversary that fell before him, the message became unmistakable: he was not an actor playing a role, but a man whose very existence had become a bulwark against the encroaching darkness. In the midst of the turmoil, the sounds of reinforcements, a low, insistent rumble of vehicles over gravel and the distant murmur of additional voices, signaled that the conflict was far from over. The safe house, once a symbol of temporary solace, now teetered on the brink of being overrun. Recognizing the inevitability of a larger, coordinated assault, Keanu made a swift, strategic decision. With a final, resolute glance toward the hidden young woman, he signaled that it was time to abandon the crumbling refuge. In one fluid, determined motion, he gathered his few belongings and steeled himself for the next phase of their escape, a journey that would carry them deeper into the wilderness and further away from the clutches of an empire built on fear and corruption. The ensuing moments were a blur of calculated retreat and desperate evasion. As Keanu led the young woman through a concealed exit at the back of the cabin, the sounds of combat and pursuit receded into a distant, ominous echo. The forest, dark and impenetrable in its ancient mystery, once again became their only ally, a labyrinth of shadow and light that promised both danger and sanctuary in equal measure. With every cautious step taken into the thicket, the duo left behind the shattered remnants of the safe house and the echoes of a fierce battle that would be etched in memory as a turning point in their struggle. Under the watchful gaze of a burgeoning dawn, their silhouettes melted into the dense foliage. The retreat was not marked by despair, but by a steadfast determination, a resolve to forge ahead despite the mounting odds. In the quiet recesses of the forest, where every rustle and whisper of the wind carried the secrets of survival, Keanu and his newfound ally began the arduous journey to put distance between themselves and the relentless pursuit of those who would see them silenced. With hearts heavy yet resolute, they pressed on, guided by the promise of freedom beyond the confines of violence and the fragile hope of a new beginning. In the pale light of early morning, after the tumultuous battle at the cabin had receded into a distant, echoing memory, Keanu Reeves and his young companion plunged deeper into the embrace of the wilderness. The forest, an endless tapestry of intertwined branches and sun-dappled clearings, became both their refuge and their labyrinth. Every step forward was a deliberate act of defiance against the empire that pursued them, an empire whose tendrils of corruption extended even into the supposed sanctity of nature. The air was cool and damp, carrying the earthy fragrance of moss, pine, and freshly turned soil. Keanu's eyes, ever vigilant despite the exhaustion that tugged at his limbs, scanned the dense undergrowth for signs of both danger and safe passage. The quiet murmur of a nearby stream provided a constant, soothing counterpoint to the adrenaline-fueled rhythm of his heartbeat. With each measured step along the narrow, winding path, he recalled the faces of those he'd encountered on this tumultuous journey, the hardened expressions of cartel enforcers, the trembling resolve of a woman forced to flee from a life of cruelty, and the enigmatic presence of allies yet unknown. Their escape had been a masterclass in rapid evasion. The clash at the cabin had been fierce, but now the forest, with its hidden trails and shadowed groves, offered a semblance of anonymity. The duo pressed on, moving off the beaten track into a thicket of ancient trees whose gnarled trunks bore silent witness to countless untold stories. The interplay of light and shadow was at once deceptive and inspiring. Sunbeams pierced the canopy in sporadic bursts, casting fleeting, luminous patterns on the forest floor that danced with every slight movement of the wind. Keanu's thoughts were a carefully guarded mixture of tactical awareness and introspection. He remembered the whispered rumors he'd heard during his earlier days on the ranch, the tales of secret hideouts and forgotten trails known only to those who had once sought to escape the oppressive forces of modern society. Now, driven by the necessity of survival, he retraced those hidden routes with the precision of a seasoned operative. The journey was not without its hardships. Tangled underbrush snagged at his worn boots, and the uneven terrain tested both his physical endurance and his mental fortitude. Yet every obstacle was met with a calm determination that had defined him both on screen and in the crucible of real-life peril. As the hours passed, the landscape shifted subtly. The forest gradually opened into a series of rugged clearings bordered by steep embankments and rocky outcroppings. In these spaces, the sky stretched wide and clear, a stark contrast to the claustrophobic density of the woodland. It was here, in a particularly expansive clearing ringed by ancient boulders, that the duo paused to catch their breath and reassess their situation. The sunlight was now at its zenith, bathing the clearing in a brilliant, almost harsh clarity that revealed every detail, the jagged textures of the rocks, the delicate petals of wildflowers struggling to bloom amidst adversity, and the reflective sheen of a distant lake that beckoned as a potential waypoint. In that moment of temporary respite, the young woman, whose name remained unspoken yet whose presence resonated with a quiet strength, sat upon a smooth, sun-warmed stone. Her eyes, though still haunted by the horrors of the previous night, betrayed a spark of hope as she surveyed the vast openness before her. Keanu, ever the protector, took a seat beside her, his gaze turning inward as he contemplated the fragile balance between freedom and danger. There was a serenity in the openness of the clearing, but it was also a place where vulnerability was magnified, and any sign of pursuit would be immediately evident in the open expanse. The distant sound of rustling leaves and the intermittent call of a hawk signaled that the quiet was transient. Keanu's instincts, honed through years of preparation and tempered by unexpected real-life confrontations, detected a subtle disturbance in the air, a barely perceptible shift that suggested they were not entirely alone. Though no immediate threat materialized, the moment served as a stark reminder that the forces pursuing them were relentless, and that the sanctity of this clearing was only temporary. With a measured glance at his companion, Keanu conveyed silently that they must press on, leaving behind the deceptive safety of the open ground in favor of the concealment offered by denser forest. Their path led them once more into a region where nature's wild, unbridled spirit reigned. The terrain became rugged and undulating, the forest reclaiming its dominion with towering stands of evergreens and a floor carpeted in ferns and tangled brambles. Here, the duo adopted a stealthier pace, moving in the quiet intervals between bird calls and the low, steady hum of insects. Keanu's mind was a repository of survival techniques, knowledge gleaned not only from years of training but also from the raw, unfiltered experience of having to make split-second decisions in the face of overwhelming adversity. Every rustle in the underbrush, every flicker of movement in the peripheral vision, was scrutinized for signs of the enemy. Yet, despite the constant pressure, a quiet resilience began to bloom within both of them, a shared understanding that the struggle for survival was also a journey of inner transformation. The forest seemed to shift its character as afternoon advanced. Shafts of light broke through the canopy in sporadic bursts, illuminating patches of the forest floor with a transient brilliance that contrasted sharply with the deep, lingering shadows. The interplay of these elements created a surreal mosaic of light and dark, a visual metaphor for the battle between hope and despair that raged within their hearts. Keanu's footsteps became more measured, his every move reflecting a deep-seated resolve to navigate this treacherous world with both caution and unyielding determination. During a brief pause near a cluster of ancient pines, Keanu allowed himself a moment of introspection. The journey was more than a physical escape, it was an odyssey of the spirit, a trial by fire that would ultimately define his character and reshape his destiny. He recalled the roles he had played, the countless cinematic battles that had, in their own way, prepared him for moments like these. But nothing on any set could fully encapsulate the raw, unmediated terror and resolve of facing real danger. In the quiet interlude, he vowed to not only protect his young companion but also to ensure that the truth of their struggle would one day be told, a testament to the enduring human spirit and the possibility of redemption even in the darkest hours. The sound of a distant engine, barely audible over the natural symphony of the forest, jolted them back into a heightened state of alertness. It was a reminder that the cartel's reach was vast and that the forces aligned against them might not be confined to the predictable patterns of nature. Keanu's eyes narrowed as he peered through a gap in the foliage, trying to discern the source of the sound. For a few tense moments, time seemed to slow as the world held its breath, then, as if a phantom had drifted away on the wind, the sound receded into silence once more. Yet, the incident reinforced their understanding that every step forward was fraught with peril, and that trust in the fleeting moments of quiet was a luxury they could ill afford. Realizing that continued movement was their best hope of evasion, Keanu resumed leading the way along a narrow, overgrown trail that snaked through a dense copse of cedar and juniper trees. The path, scarcely visible and treacherous underfoot, required their full attention. Every root that jutted unexpectedly from the ground, every uneven patch of earth, was a potential hazard that could betray their position or slow their progress. Despite the exhaustion that threatened to overtake him, Keanu's focus remained razor-sharp, a testament to the unyielding discipline that had seen him through countless trials in both film and life. The hours melted away as the duo traversed this ever-changing landscape, the boundaries between day and night blurring in the dappled interplay of sunlight and shade. They passed through groves that seemed untouched by time, where the only signs of human intervention were the faint, almost imperceptible tracks left by those who had once sought refuge in these wild enclaves. The world around them was a living, breathing entity, an ancient force that carried within it the echoes of countless stories of struggle, triumph, and quiet despair. And as they moved through this storied realm, Keanu and his companion became part of that narrative, their own journey interwoven with the timeless rhythms of nature. In one such grove, where the trees arched overhead to form a natural cathedral, the pair encountered a small clearing marked by a weathered stone structure, an abandoned outbuilding that might once have served as a lookout or a storage shed. Though dilapidated and overtaken by ivy and creeping vines, it held the promise of a brief respite. Keanu motioned for the young woman to wait as he cautiously approached the structure, his every sense alert to any sign of movement. The building, with its creaking wooden panels and shattered windows, was a relic of a bygone era, yet it seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, a latent hope that somewhere amid the ruins, a spark of sanctuary could be found. Inside, the air was thick with the musty scent of decay and history. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light that penetrated the broken roof, and every creak of the old wood resonated like a whispered memory of those who had come before. Keanu quickly surveyed the interior, noting the position of loose boards, the presence of old tools that could serve as makeshift weapons, and a narrow, winding staircase leading to a loft that might provide a vantage point or a temporary refuge. Satisfied that the structure offered at least a modicum of protection, he returned outside and signaled to the young woman to follow him. For a few precious moments, they allowed themselves to rest within the shelter of the outbuilding, sharing whispered words of cautious hope and reflecting on the relentless demands of their flight. In those moments, the outside world, with its looming threats and encroaching danger, seemed to pause, offering a brief interlude of fragile calm. But the forest, ever indifferent to human plight, reminded them that this respite was only temporary. The engine's distant rumble, the faintest rustle of leaves beyond the walls, served as an incessant reminder that time was a luxury they could not waste. Reinvigorated by their brief intermission, Keanu and his companion emerged from the outbuilding with renewed determination. Their journey was far from over, the path ahead remained shrouded in uncertainty and danger. With the memory of the recent battle still vivid in their minds and the specter of the cartel's enforcers ever present in the back of their thoughts, they resumed their trek through the wilderness. Each step carried with it the weight of their shared history and the unspoken promise that, no matter the cost, they would see the dawn of a new day free from the tyranny that had once held them captive. Thus, under the vast, indifferent canopy of the ancient forest, their escape continued, a relentless odyssey through nature's shifting landscapes, fraught with danger, resilience, and the indomitable will to survive. The journey was an ongoing testament to the power of the human spirit, a narrative etched into the very soil beneath their feet, where every whisper of the wind and every rustle of the leaves bore witness to their unyielding determination to forge a path toward freedom. As the duo pressed on from the relative shelter of the abandoned outbuilding, the forest seemed to change its character once again. The dense canopy overhead gradually gave way to a mosaic of sunlight and shadow, where the interplay of light became a natural guide along a narrow, winding trail that meandered toward a distant ridge. The terrain was rugged and unpredictable, each step a deliberate act of will as Keanu Reeves led his companion through a landscape that balanced on the cusp between wild beauty and relentless danger. Every rustle of leaves, every whisper of wind, carried with it echoes of past conflicts and the promise of an uncertain future. The path ahead was dotted with natural obstacles, fallen trees, slippery rocks, and thick patches of underbrush, that served both as hindrances and as potential havens for concealment. Keanu moved with an unwavering determination, his eyes scanning the surroundings with a mixture of practiced vigilance and quiet resolve. His every step was marked by a subtle awareness of the enemy's shadow, for the cartel's reach had proven to be as persistent as it was insidious. Yet, amid the constant threat of pursuit, a growing sense of liberation began to permeate the journey, a fragile hope that whispered of a future unburdened by fear and oppression. Their progress was punctuated by brief moments of stillness, during which the silence of the forest spoke louder than any threat. In one such pause near a babbling brook, the soft gurgling of water over smooth stones provided a momentary respite from the tension. Keanu knelt beside the stream and filled his water bottle with the clear, cool liquid, his eyes fixed on the rippling surface as if seeking counsel from the eternal flow. The young woman, sitting on a nearby rock and her gaze distant yet determined, allowed herself a moment to absorb the serenity of the scene, a stark contrast to the chaos that had marked the hours before. The tranquility of the brook was deceptive, however, as subtle disturbances in the undergrowth hinted that their pursuers might be drawing closer. The forest, with its ancient wisdom, held secrets that only the most attentive could decipher. Keanu's senses, sharpened by countless ordeals both on-screen and off, picked up on the almost imperceptible vibrations in the earth. He signaled silently to his companion, and together they moved deeper into the thicket, their presence merging with the shadows and the dappled light. As they continued upward along the ridge, the forest began to thin, revealing expansive views of rolling hills and distant valleys. The horizon was painted with hues of early afternoon, the soft gold of sunlight mixing with the lingering blue of a sky that promised both beauty and peril. This panoramic vista, though breathtaking, was a stark reminder of the vast territory over which the cartel's influence might extend. Every distant sound, a bird's cry, the rustling of a breeze through tall grasses, was both a lullaby of nature's splendor and a cautionary note of vulnerability. At the crest of the ridge, where the land opened up into a sweeping plateau, the air grew crisp and the silence deeper. Here, amidst a scattering of ancient boulders and sparse vegetation, the pair paused to reassess their route. Keanu's experienced gaze swept over the landscape. Noting the subtle indicators of safe passage, a shallow depression that might conceal a forgotten trail, the natural cover of a rocky outcrop, and the gentle rise of a hill that offered both vantage and concealment. In that quiet moment of contemplation, the young woman, whose eyes had borne the trauma of her past yet shimmered with newfound resolve, gathered her courage. Together, they planned their next move, mapping out a route that would take them further away from the relentless hunt and toward the promise of sanctuary in a nearby border town rumored to be sympathetic to those who had suffered at the hands of the cartel. Their journey resumed with a renewed sense of urgency. The plateau gave way to a series of rolling meadows, where the lush green grasses swayed under the caress of the afternoon breeze. The openness of the meadows was both a blessing and a curse, providing clear, unobstructed views of the surroundings while simultaneously exposing them to potential ambush. Keanu's every step was measured, his body tensed for any sign of a hidden threat. His mind, a repository of both cinematic lore and real-life grit, recalled every encounter, every lesson learned in the crucible of conflict. The resolve to shield his companion, born of both empathy and a fierce inner code, propelled him forward. In the midst of the meadows, a weathered signpost emerged from the tall grass, its faded lettering hinting at an old route leading to a border crossing, a place where, if they could reach it, the tangled web of cartel influence might finally be left behind. The sign was nearly obscured by vines and thyme, yet it shone like a beacon of possibility. With a subtle nod, Keanu acknowledged that this was the direction they needed to take. The path, though fraught with its own uncertainties, offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to traverse not only the physical distance but also the chasm between the life they were forced to flee and the promise of a future where fear no longer dictated their every breath. Under the vast expanse of the afternoon sky, the journey through the meadow was punctuated by moments of cautious observation and fleeting solace. The pair moved with deliberate stealth, each step a quiet rebellion against the forces that sought to undermine their freedom. The sound of their footsteps was muffled by the thick carpet of grass, and the gentle murmur of the wind provided a counterpoint to the persistent tension of being hunted. Yet, in the openness of the field, every shadow was a potential threat, every rustle in the tall grass a possible harbinger of danger. Keanu's instincts, honed by years of survival and shaped by both art and experience, remained on high alert. As they neared the outskirts of the meadow, the landscape began to transform once again. The rolling fields gradually gave way to a scattering of low stone buildings and narrow dirt roads, a humble town that lay at the edge of civilization and wilderness. The architecture, modest and time-worn, spoke of generations of resilience and quiet defiance in the face of adversity. Here, in this border town, the oppressed might find a semblance of justice, and those who had long suffered under the yoke of corruption could begin to rebuild their lives. For Keanu and his companion, this town was more than just a waypoint, it was a potential new beginning, a place where the scars of the past could slowly fade into the background of a life reimagined. The transition from the wild, untamed meadow to the structured, albeit humble, contours of the town was marked by an uneasy calm. The streets, narrow and lined with time-worn facades, held the promise of anonymity, a chance to blend in and escape the relentless gaze of the cartel. Yet, as they stepped into the shadowed alleyways and beneath the faded awnings of local shops, the duo could not shake the awareness that danger might lurk even in this tentative sanctuary. Every face they passed, every hushed conversation in the dim light of a local cafe, was a reminder that trust was a currency hard-earned and easily squandered. In the midst of the town, an old community center stood as a silent monument to better times, a building that had once been a hub for gatherings, celebrations, and shared dreams. Now, its weathered walls and sagging roof bore witness to decades of hardship, yet it also held the promise of unity and support. Keanu and his companion approached the center cautiously, their presence a quiet plea for assistance amid a world that had grown increasingly hostile. Inside, they hoped to find refuge, perhaps even allies who had the courage to stand against the cartel's tyranny. The prospect of a community that could provide not only shelter but also the seeds of resistance filled them with a renewed sense of purpose. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the town's quiet streets, the pair found themselves drawn to the community center. Its heavy wooden doors creaked open to reveal a modest interior filled with mismatched chairs, old bulletin boards, and the faint aroma of freshly brewed coffee, a comforting reminder of life's simpler pleasures. In that moment, the young woman allowed herself a brief smile, the first genuine expression of hope since her harrowing escape. Keanu, too, felt the stirrings of cautious optimism. Here, in this unassuming building, lay the possibility of forging a new path, a path that might ultimately lead to not only freedom but also justice for those wronged by the cartel's ruthless reign. Yet, even as they stepped into the sanctuary of the community center, the weight of their journey remained ever present. The distant echoes of their pursuers, the lingering threat of betrayal, and the unresolved shadows of past violence hovered just at the periphery of their newfound refuge. In the soft light of dusk, the center became a crucible for planning and reflection, a place where weary souls could find the strength to rise again. Keanu and his companion exchanged determined glances as they settled into a quiet corner, the murmurs of local voices and the low hum of evening activity offering both distraction and solace. Their conversation was measured and thoughtful, a careful mapping of the steps required to secure their future while evading the relentless specter of their enemies. In that moment of fragile peace, the journey took on a dual nature, a physical traversal of distance and a metaphorical passage from despair to hope. The town, with its humble streets and weathered buildings, offered the promise of a community willing to stand up against injustice. And while the threat of the cartel loomed like a dark cloud on the horizon, the warmth of shared humanity within the community center kindled the belief that change was possible. The resolve in Keanu's eyes mirrored the quiet determination of those around him, a silent vow that the cruelty of the past would not dictate the future. Thus, as twilight deepened into night and the town's lanterns flickered to life one by one, Keanu Reeves and his resilient companion found themselves at a crossroads, a point where their arduous escape converged with the possibility of a new beginning. In the gentle murmur of voices and the soft glow of communal warmth, they prepared to weave their story into the fabric of a community that dared to dream of liberation from a tyranny built on fear. Their journey, marked by trials, sacrifice, and unwavering resolve, had led them to this fragile oasis of hope, a sanctuary from which the seeds of revolution might one day blossom into a future free from the shadows of violence. In the quiet aftermath of dusk at the community center, when the last echoes of conversation had faded into the murmur of a settling night, Keanu Reeves and his resilient companion found themselves enveloped in a fragile calm that was as transient as it was necessary. The humble building, with its worn wooden floors and time-stained walls, had become a haven, a brief interlude of solidarity amid the ceaseless pursuit of a relentless enemy. Over cups of lukewarm coffee brewed by sympathetic locals, plans were carefully laid out, mapping the precarious route to a safer haven beyond the cartel's immediate grasp. The community, bound together by shared hardship and an unyielding desire for justice, had slowly gathered around them. Quiet voices spoke of clandestine networks and hidden routes. of sympathetic officials and a secret passage through the labyrinth of bureaucracy that could finally lead to asylum. Keanu, ever the embodiment of both cinematic valor and authentic grit, absorbed every detail with a quiet intensity. His gaze, set in a mask of determination honed by years of confrontation and survival, wandered over maps and faded blueprints spread across a creaking table. Each wrinkle in his brow was a silent testament to the gravity of the situation. Every route, every possible safe house, was weighed against the inevitability that the cartel would leave no stone unturned in their pursuit. In those moments of hushed strategy, the young woman, her eyes now a wellspring of hard-won resolve, spoke softly about her own past, revealing the scars of a life marred by betrayal and the ruthless machinations of her father's empire. Her voice, though tempered by pain, carried the unmistakable timbre of defiance, as if each syllable were a pledge to reclaim the future that had been so cruelly stolen from her. The community center, in its humble defiance of a corrupt world, became a crucible where disparate lives converged with a single purpose. Locals, who had long endured the oppressive weight of cartel influence in silence, now lent their resources and wisdom to Keanu's cause. An elderly man, his face etched with the map of a lifetime of quiet suffering and resistance, unfolded a battered envelope filled with confidential contacts, names and addresses whispered down through generations, each a potential lifeline to the outside world. A young woman, her eyes sharp with the unspoken promise of revolution, recounted the existence of a covert smuggling route used by migrants to escape tyranny. This route, she believed, might well be the path that could carry them out of the cartel's crosshairs. Together, these fragments of hope were woven into a tentative plan, a perilous journey that would carry them through unfamiliar territories and across borders into the promise of freedom. Yet, as the night deepened and the community center's windows glowed with the soft light of determination, the specter of danger remained ever present. Outside, the distant rumble of engines and the low hum of urgent whispers on the wind were constant reminders that the cartel's operatives had not yet been disabused of their resolve. The old radio in one corner crackled with sporadic news bulletins, snippets of information that suggested the cartel's reach had even extended into corridors of power, corrupting those meant to protect the innocent. Each new piece of information lent urgency to their plans, as the boundaries between friend and foe blurred beneath layers of deceit and fear. In the midst of these grim realities, Keanu's mind drifted to the duality of his own existence, the dichotomy between the roles he had once played on the silver screen and the raw, unvarnished truth of the present moment. Every action, every decision, now carried the weight of lives in balance. There was no longer room for pretense or the comforting illusions of Hollywood myth. The stakes were visceral, and the price of failure was measured in blood and shattered dreams. As he pored over the maps and coordinated with the discreet network of allies, he was acutely aware that each passing minute drew them closer to a confrontation that would test the very limits of human endurance. The early hours of the morning brought a transient clarity, a time when the sky, painted with the tentative hues of dawn, seemed to offer a promise of redemption. Stepping out from the relative warmth of the community center, Keanu and his companion moved with deliberate stealth along narrow, cobbled streets that wound through the town like relics of a forgotten era. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the mingled scents of dew and aged stone, and every sound, be it the soft clatter of footsteps or the distant murmur of voices, was magnified in the stillness of the pre-dawn hours. Shadows danced along the walls of time-worn buildings, merging past with present in a silent ballet that echoed the complexities of their own journey. Their plan was as audacious as it was dangerous, to reach a clandestine transit point on the outskirts of the town, where a trusted contact awaited with a battered truck capable of disappearing into the labyrinth of backroads and hidden alleys that led to a neighboring country. This route, known only to those who had once dared to challenge the cartel's tyranny, was a thread of hope woven into a tapestry of risk. Every whispered instruction and carefully exchanged glance was imbued with the knowledge that one misstep could unravel the fragile alliance that held them together. The community, too, had rallied in silent solidarity. Discreet signals and subtle gestures had been exchanged, marking the passage of information that would guide them to the rendezvous point. As the first light of day broke over the horizon, casting long, pale beams onto the deserted streets, Keanu led his companion through a series of narrow back alleys. Their movements were practiced and precise, honed by the necessity of remaining unseen by those whose eyes could appear at any moment. In these moments of clandestine transit, the weight of their mission was palpable, a silent acknowledgement that beyond the safety of these dimly lit corridors lay a world still under the oppressive sway of a ruthless regime. Yet, with each careful step, the distance between the past and a potential future of liberation grew ever shorter. In a small courtyard bordered by ivy-clad walls and time-worn arches, they encountered a temporary ally, a local man whose wary eyes betrayed a history of both loss and resistance. The stranger, speaking in measured tones laden with the gravity of lived experience, handed Keanu a folded piece of paper containing the final coordinates and a hastily scrawled message of warning. The border crossing was heavily guarded by mercenaries on behalf of the cartel, and any attempt to breach it would demand both cunning and unwavering courage. This message, simple in its form but monumental in its implications, underscored the peril of their next move. With a final nod of mutual understanding, the local man melted back into the shadows, leaving behind a lingering sense of both hope and foreboding. Emboldened by the collective resolve of the community and the unspoken promises that had been exchanged in the secrecy of night, Keanu and his companion resumed their journey toward the border. The landscape began to shift subtly as the town gave way to open country, a stretch of barren fields and meandering dirt roads that testified to the stark realities of life on the margins of society. Here, the land was raw and unyielding, its harsh beauty underscored by the distant silhouette of rugged hills and the low hum of wind stirring up clouds of dust. Every moment in this exposed environment was a calculated risk, for the open fields offered little concealment from the ever-watchful eyes of their pursuers. As the hours passed and the sun ascended higher into a sky that was rapidly shedding the chill of night, the terrain became more challenging. The road, now little more than a weather track winding through parched fields, demanded both physical endurance and mental fortitude. The duo pressed on, their pace steady but their hearts pounding with the awareness that danger could manifest at any moment, a sudden checkpoint, a lurking vehicle, or an ambush by operatives determined to recapture the fugitive daughter of a notorious cartel king. With each step, the young woman's silent determination grew, intermingling with Keanu's unwavering resolve. Together, they had become symbols of defiance, embodiments of the unyielding human spirit in the face of overwhelming adversity. The border itself loomed in the distance like a promise of salvation, its contours defined by a combination of natural features and man-made fortifications. Rumors whispered through the community had described it as both a gateway and a gauntlet, a narrow passage where the weak were culled and the resolute found passage to a new beginning. As they approached this fateful boundary, the air seemed to thicken with tension. The rhythmic crunch of their footsteps on the dry earth was accompanied by an almost imperceptible cadence, a drumbeat of fate that resonated with the lives of all those who had dared to dream of freedom. In a final stretch that tested the limits of their endurance, Keanu and his companion neared the checkpoint. Here, amid the barren expanses and under the relentless scrutiny of a scorching sun, the true magnitude of their mission was revealed. The checkpoint was manned by figures whose expressions were as hardened as the unforgiving terrain, their eyes cold and unyielding as they scrutinized every traveler. The atmosphere was charged with an electric mix of desperation and determination, as those who wished to cross the border clutched their few possessions and whispered silent prayers to gods long forgotten. Steeling himself against the encroaching fear, Keanu took the lead. Every nuance of his posture and every measured glance conveyed the silent assurance of a man who had faced insurmountable odds before. With the map and the precious coordinates burning in his mind, he approached the border outpost with a quiet resolve. In that fraught moment, the fate of not only his own future but also that of the young woman, an emblem of resilience and defiance, rested on the precipice of a single, decisive action. The ensuing encounter was a tense ballet of negotiation and subterfuge, as Keanu employed every ounce of his cunning and charm to bypass the suspicious glares and scrutinizing questions of the border guards. It was a performance where every word, every gesture, was weighed against the stakes of freedom and the specter of retribution. In the end, the guards, perhaps moved by an ineffable sense of empathy or the realization that the currents of fate were shifting, permitted them passage. The border, that fraught threshold between tyranny and hope, was crossed under a sky that now blazed with the promise of a new dawn. Beyond the checkpoint, as the landscape transformed once again, this time into a mosaic of rolling hills, scattered groves, and distant, welcoming lights, Keanu and his companion allowed themselves a moment of fragile respite. The oppressive weight of the past hours seemed to lift, if only marginally, as they found themselves in a place where the enemy's long reach was, for now, a distant memory. In that brief interval of solace, the young woman's eyes, still reflecting the scars of her former life, shone with the possibility of a future untainted by the cruelty of her past. Keanu, whose journey had been etched in both the silver light of cinema and the grim reality of survival, looked toward the horizon with a tempered optimism that belied the challenges yet to come. The road ahead was uncertain, a winding path through a land of both beauty and lingering peril, but within that uncertainty lay the seed of true freedom. The collective support of the community, the quiet bravery of allies forged in the crucible of shared struggle, and the indomitable will to reclaim a life unburdened by fear had carried them this far. And now, as they ventured further into this new chapter, each step was imbued with the silent promise that the legacy of oppression would be challenged, that the fires of revolution would kindle a future of hope and justice. Thus, under a vast and forgiving sky, with the distant glow of a new land beckoning, Keanu Reeves and his steadfast companion pressed on. Their journey, a tapestry woven from threads of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of dignity, continued toward a horizon that promised not only escape but the birth of a life reimagined, a life where every moment was a defiant celebration of the human spirit, unshackled and resolute in the face of darkness. After the arduous crossing, the landscape transformed yet again as Keanu Reeves and his steadfast companion entered a new country, a land that bore the hopeful hues of rebirth amid rugged terrain and modest urban enclaves. The once relentless pursuit of their former life had given way to a tentative reprieve, as they stepped onto soil that promised both sanctuary and the possibility of starting anew. The air was crisper here, filled with a mix of rural charm and the quiet hum of progress, as small towns clung to tradition while cautiously embracing modernity. In this foreign expanse, the duo found themselves enveloped by an atmosphere of cautious optimism. Each step forward was a measured defiance against the tyranny they had narrowly escaped. Within a discreet safe house tucked away in the outskirts of a modest village, the pair took refuge. The building, modest yet sturdy, a converted farmhouse with sun-bleached walls and wide, open verandas, offered a semblance of home. Here, under the gentle watch of ancient oak trees and the distant murmur of a meandering river, Keanu allowed himself a brief moment of respite. The days of frantic evasion had left their mark, his body ached with fatigue, and the weight of constant vigilance pressed upon him like an unyielding force. Yet, amid that exhaustion, his eyes still burned with the quiet intensity of a man who had faced danger head-on and emerged with his resolve unbroken. Within the safe house's modest interior, the atmosphere was filled with an unspoken determination to build a future free from the oppressive shadows of the past. Keanu spent long hours poring over maps, re-examining routes, and studying fragments of intelligence that had been relayed through the network of allies he had painstakingly assembled. The local community, aware of the dangers that lurked in the remnants of cartel influence, offered discreet support, a handwritten note here, a whispered tip there, each small gesture weaving a safety net that stretched far beyond the narrow confines of their temporary shelter. As the days unfolded, the young woman, whose past had been marred by cruelty and betrayal, began to open up about the scars that had shaped her life. In hushed moments shared over cups of strong, bitter tea, she recounted the hardships she had endured at the hands of her father's empire, a narrative filled with both sorrow and defiance. Her voice, once brittle with fear, grew steadier with each passing day, her eyes reflecting the resilient spark of a soul determined not to be defined by the cruelty of her past. In her quiet disclosures, the foundation of a plan emerged, a plan to not only ensure their own survival but to confront the very source of the oppression that had driven them into exile. Keanu's own reflections were equally profound. The border crossing, once a desperate flight for freedom, had crystallized into a turning point, a moment when the burden of survival gave way to the resolve to seek justice. The experiences that had once played out like scenes from a film now demanded a different kind of courage. No longer content to remain a fugitive, he began to contemplate the necessity of returning to the heart of darkness to dismantle the cartel's operations once and for all. It was a dangerous thought, a reconnection with an enemy whose power was vast and whose cruelty knew no bounds, but it was a notion that had taken root in the silent spaces between each heartbeat. Within the safe house's quiet corridors, the duo engaged in long, measured discussions about the future. They reviewed every piece of evidence gathered during their desperate flight, recordings, eyewitness accounts, and even the covert intelligence shared by those who had suffered under the cartel's ruthless regime. Each detail painted a grim portrait of an empire built on fear, extortion, and violence, a portrait that was now poised to be challenged by the indomitable will of those who had been oppressed for far too long. Amid these discussions, the young woman revealed a pivotal piece of information, a secret that had been concealed even from those closest to her. The cartel's operations were not confined solely to the violent acts that had plagued her past, but extended into the corridors of power, influencing local law enforcement and corrupting officials. This revelation added urgency to their mission. Keanu's gaze, steady and resolute, reflected the dawning realization that the struggle ahead was not just about personal survival, but about the possibility of dismantling an entire criminal network that had cast a long, dark shadow over countless lives. The safe house, bathed in the gentle glow of early evening light, became a crucible of planning and resolve. Outside, the landscape offered glimpses of hope, a village slowly waking to the promise of a new day, fields glistening with the golden sheen of harvest, and distant hills that seemed to cradle the horizon with quiet dignity. Within, Keanu meticulously outlined a strategy that would enable them to gather additional intelligence and, ultimately, to strike at the cartel's nerve center. His plan was as audacious as it was perilous, a return to the very heart of the enemy's territory, not as a desperate fugitive, but as a determined avenger prepared to exact retribution on the man who had once orchestrated a reign of terror. The notion of returning ignited a turbulent mix of emotions. For the young woman, the thought of confronting the source of her torment was both terrifying and liberating, a chance to reclaim the narrative of her life by confronting the darkness that had haunted her for so long. For Keanu, it was a call to arms, a final act of defiance against a system built on fear and corruption. Their shared decision, to one day come back and hold the cartel's mastermind accountable, was forged in the crucible of shared suffering and the unyielding desire for justice. It was a decision that promised no guarantees, only the fierce hope that those who had been downtrodden could rise up and reclaim their dignity. In the days that followed, as the safe house became a temporary sanctuary of planning and introspection, the duo began to make quiet preparations for the journey ahead. Under the cover of night, with whispered farewells and the silent promises of return etched into every glance, they gathered the tools and information that would be essential for their eventual assault. Keanu's resolve solidified with each passing moment, transforming his role from a reluctant guardian on the run to an avenging force destined to dismantle an empire of cruelty. At last, as dusk settled over the new land, casting long shadows over the modest village and igniting the horizon with the soft blush of twilight, Keanu and his companion stood at a crossroads. The immediate threat had receded into the distance, replaced by the daunting reality of the mission that lay ahead, a mission that would lead them back into the very heart of the cartel's operations. Their parting from the safe house was marked not by sorrow, but by a steely determination to return stronger, armed with the evidence and the alliances necessary to challenge the tyrant who had once ruled through fear. With the promise of future reckoning burning in their hearts, the duo temporarily embraced the solace of their new surroundings. Yet, even as they allowed themselves a brief respite, the memory of past injustices and the drive for retribution loomed large. The plan was set: gather more allies, amass incontrovertible proof of the cartel's atrocities, and, when the time was right, launch an operation that would not only rescue the countless victims of that merciless empire but also shatter its foundations forever. Thus, beneath a sky streaked with the fading hues of twilight and the hopeful glow of approaching dawn, Keanu Reeves and his determined companion resolved to prepare for the ultimate confrontation. Their journey, a tapestry woven from threads of pain, resilience, and unwavering courage, was far from over. It had entered a new phase, a phase that promised not only escape from a brutal past but also the potential to redefine the future through the relentless pursuit of justice. The days that followed the careful planning in the safe house gave way to a resolve that burned with the intensity of long-suppressed fire. Keanu Reeves and his steadfast companion, having amassed a network of allies and gathered the damning evidence of the cartel's atrocities, prepared to launch their final assault, a decisive strike aimed at the heart of the enemy's power. The target was the elusive mastermind, the man whose ruthless ambition had once orchestrated unspeakable violence and whose shadow had darkened the lives of countless innocents, including the young woman whose fate had kindled their crusade. Under the cloak of a moonless night, the duo, now accompanied by a cadre of local fighters and sympathetic defectors, set out on a covert operation to infiltrate the fortified compound where the cartel boss resided. The journey was a testament to the fragility of hope amidst carnage. Each step through narrow alleyways and hidden passages carried the collective breath of those who had suffered under tyranny and now dared to reclaim their lives. In hushed tones and with eyes that spoke of unyielding determination, they navigated through shadowed corridors and long-forgotten tunnels that wove beneath the city like veins of resistance. At the precipice of the compound, where high walls and barbed wire stood as stark monuments to the enemy's might, Keanu paused, his gaze fixed on the looming structure that represented a decades-long reign of terror. In that suspended moment, the weight of every sacrifice, every tear shed by the oppressed, converged with the quiet strength of his resolve. His companion, now a symbol of reborn hope and resilience, offered a look that conveyed both gratitude and fierce determination, a silent vow that this night would be the turning point. The operation unfolded with a precision born of shared desperation and honed through countless nights of clandestine planning. Keanu led the charge, his every movement a blend of calculated grace and relentless ferocity, a living embodiment of the heroism that transcended mere on-screen myth. The clash was brutal and swift. In the labyrinthine corridors of the compound, the sound of combat merged with the echo of defiant cries. Amid the chaos, Keanu's focus never wavered. His strikes were as deliberate as they were forceful, each blow a repudiation of the cruelty that had long reigned within those walls. At the core of the compound, in a grand, shadowed hall where opulence had been twisted into a throne of fear, Keanu confronted the cartel boss. The air was thick with menace as the two figures faced one another, a silent duel of wills that encapsulated years of injustice and the desperate longing for redemption. The boss's words, laced with arrogance and regret, fell upon the implacable resolve of a man who had already transcended the boundaries of his former life. The ensuing confrontation was a maelstrom of violence and resolve, each moment etched into the tapestry of a battle that would redefine the fate of many. With a final, decisive maneuver that left no doubt about the cost of oppression, Keanu subdued the mastermind, ensuring that the cycle of fear would finally be broken. In the aftermath of the carnage, as dawn's first light crept over the horizon, the compound lay silent, a mausoleum to a bygone era of tyranny. Keanu and his allies, weary yet vindicated, gathered what remained of the evidence that would expose the cartel's network to the world. The mission was complete, but the scars of the struggle would endure as a solemn reminder of the price paid for freedom. True to the nature of his enigmatic journey, Keanu did not linger to claim accolades. Instead, he arranged for a discreet departure from the embattled land, a quiet flight that would carry him to a distant country where the ghosts of his past would not follow. As the aircraft ascended into a vast, forgiving sky, the memories of battle, sacrifice, and the flickering hope of revolution receded into the distance, leaving behind a man transformed by the crucible of conflict. Months later, in a quiet moment far removed from the violence that had defined his recent past, Keanu found solace in the routine of a new life in an unfamiliar land. Amid the hum of daily existence, an unexpected letter arrived in his mailbox, a neatly folded note bearing the familiar handwriting of the young woman he had once rescued. In its careful script, she expressed heartfelt gratitude for the courage that had saved her life and rekindled her hope for a future free from the chains of her haunted past. Her words, tender yet resolute, spoke of a life reclaimed and the enduring power of a single act of valor to change the course of destiny. In that quiet, reflective moment, as Keanu read the letter under the soft glow of a new dawn, he understood that his journey had come full circle. The battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the shadows confronted had all converged to forge a future where hope could flourish in the light of freedom. And though his path would forever be marked by the scars of a turbulent past, the promise of redemption, the enduring gratitude of a life saved, stood as a testament to the unyielding strength of the human spirit.